This is Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Here now, Tony Brueski.
There's a certain type of person who confuses control with peace. They don't want quiet, they want submission. The world is supposed to stay exactly as they like it. No disruptions, no noise, no reminders that other people exist outside their personal movie. We typically call them narcissists because in the world of true crime, all roads lead to narcissism. You've met them. Maybe you've worked with one. Maybe you've lived next door to one. Maybe there's one in your family. Maybe you're married to one. Maybe your child is one. Maybe your parents are one. We relate to pieces like this, The Perfect Neighbor on Netflix, because people like this are everywhere. And they're blissfully unaware of the kind of monsters that they are. The type who takes a child's laughter as an act of aggression, who's offended by the sound of someone else's joy. That's the person this story is about. Not a monster hiding in the shadows, not a career criminal, just a woman with a door, a gun, and an ego so fragile that reality itself became an intrusion. In June of 2023, A.J. Owens, 35 years old, mother of four, knocked on her neighbor's door in Ocala, Florida. She was there to ask a question any mother would ask. Why did you throw something at my kid? Her neighbor, 58-year-old Susan Lawrence, didn't open the door. Okay? She didn't speak. Okay? She didn't call out or wait for police either. She fired one shot through the locked door and killed her. You know, like you do when a mom, your neighbor, is knocking on your door after you've thrown something at a child of hers. A single pull of a trigger turned years of petty conflict into tragedy. But this didn't begin that night. This started years earlier when a narcissist decided that other people living their lives was a personal attack. Lawrence had been complaining for 2 years about noise, about kids in the yard, about disrespect, as all narcissists do. Anyone who's constantly running around going, it's so disrespectful, they disrespected me. Anyone who overuses the term disrespect on a regular basis, run like hell from. They're a narcissist. It's a very common trait. At least I've discovered in many of them. Disrespect is a big thing to them. Perceived disrespect. It's not necessarily that they're being disrespected, it's how they're perceiving it. It's called a cognitive distortion. They love to live with those because it makes them the victim all the time. She called the police, recorded the neighbors, waved her phone like a badge of authority. She saw herself as a lone, sane person in a neighborhood full of offenders. The perfect neighbor, as she called herself. Yes. And that's the most telling part. Narcissists always write themselves into the story as the hero, the martyr, the misunderstood genius, the only adult in the room surrounded by idiots who don't follow their unspoken rules. That's what was happening here. This wasn't fear. It was grievance disguised as fear. You can hear it in the tone of her past calls to police. Self-righteous, wounded, overinflated. She wasn't asking for help. She was demanding validation. Psychologically, this is what we call narcissistic distortion of threat perception. It's when the ego becomes so dominant that discomfort feels like danger. When someone else's independence feels like defiance. It's the same mental wiring that makes a controlling spouse jealous when their partner laughs at someone else's joke. To them, every deviation is betrayal. Every sound outside their control is disrespect. Now multiply that mindset by 2 years of isolation, constant rumination, and the presence of a firearm. You get a person who feels both persecuted and powerful, kind of a lethal mix. The irony is narcissists often believe they're peacekeepers. I just want things calm. And yes, I'm using my Donna Adelson voice. I just want respect. But what they mean is, I want the world silent unless it's applauding me. And when the world doesn't comply, they escalate. They call the police. They make scenes. They weaponize rules, noise ordinances, homeowners associations. They use institutions to enforce their emotional reality. And it's just theirs. But hey, to them, that's all that matters. Every time an officer came out to listen to one of Lawrence's complaints, it reinforced her sense of authority. In her mind, the system agreed, I'm right, and they are wrong. Each call built the fantasy until reality could no longer puncture it. Now, AJ's children, real people with lives, dreams, laughter, became background noise in that fantasy. They weren't kids anymore. They were symbols of disrespect. And to a narcissist, disrespect feels existential. It is intolerable. Oh my God, it's intolerable to them. So the night she fired that gun, it wasn't out of sudden panic. It was the conclusion of a long story she'd already written in her head. They harass me. I'm the victim. No one listens until I take action. That's the cognitive distortion that kills. The inability to see where your grievance ends and another human's rights begin. You might wonder, how does someone reach that point? It starts with a seed of self-importance and a lifetime of not being challenged. People like this often collect slights the way hoarders collect trash. Wound collectors, as our friend Robin Dreek would say. Every perceived offense is stored, labeled, preserved. A neighbor's sideway glance becomes a character indictment. A child's laughter becomes proof of disrespect. And here's where the irony gets darker. Narcissists are almost always miserable. They're obsessed with control because the world constantly reminds them they don't have it. They crave validation but reject empathy. They want peace but generate chaos. They are the architects of their own unrest, and they're utterly clueless to all of this. If you live next to one, you already know the feeling. The subtle dread when you pull into your driveway and see them watching through the blinds. The way you lower your voice in your own yard. The way a simple good morning feels like stepping on a landmine. You adapt because they don't. You compromise because they won't. That's how their delusion grows. And eventually, if no one intervenes, they believe their right to enforce their rules by any means necessary. Lawrence's world had shrunk to the size of her paranoia. Every day was a new trial in the court of her own mind, where she was both judge and the victim and the jury. The kids next door were the constant defendants. But narcissists don't just crave control, they fear humiliation. And the idea that someone like AJ might knock on her door, call her out, demand accountability, that was the ultimate ego injury. To a narcissist, confrontation is annihilation. If someone is refusing to accept their script. So when AJ knocked, she wasn't just a mother defending her children. In Lawrence's mind, she was the embodiment of every imagined slight, every perceived disrespect, every neighbor who didn't bow. And narcissists don't reason with those people. They punish them. Behind that locked door, Lawrence had options. She could have waited for police. She'd done it dozens of times before. She could have spoken through the door, de-escalated, walked away. But she didn't want resolution. She wanted vindication. In her mind, a gun was the ultimate argument she could finally win. See, narcissists don't think down the line. They don't think, if I shoot this gun, I could kill somebody. If I kill somebody, I could go to jail. They think in the moment. And they think in that moment, no matter what the hell they're effed up mind is feeding them, that is going to be right. Again, that is why narcissism always wins and always takes down the narcissist. She fired once through the wood into the chest of a woman she refused to see as human anymore. That's the thing about narcissism and collapse. It always ends with destruction, either emotional, social, or physical. When their delusion breaks, they don't recalibrate. They lash out. People think narcissists are charming manipulators. Some are. Some are. But the type we see in this case, they're the brittle kind. The ones whose self-image is so fragile that reality feels like assault. They don't have the charm. They have the rage. They don't seduce. They seethe. And when you give that personality type a weapon, you're giving ego an amplifier. Suddenly their imagined control becomes literal. Their insecurity has a trigger. AJ's kids saw her collapse that night. They saw what unchecked narcissism looks like when it finally reaches terminal velocity. And now they live with that image, forever linked to someone else's fantasy of victimhood. This is what people forget. Narcissists don't just ruin their own lives. They radiate damage. Everyone around them ends up performing emotional triage. They consume empathy like oxygen. They make others responsible for maintaining their comfort. And if you fail, they punish you for it. In Lorenz's case, that punishment was fatal. But the psychological aftermath ripples outward. Those kids will grow up navigating grief and guilt, wondering if knocking on a door was a mistake, even though it wasn't. Neighbors will carry survivor's guilt. I should have said something sooner. And the community, once vibrant, now hesitates to trust, to engage, to make noise. The silence she craved became the silence everyone is left with. That's the final irony of narcissistic control. It doesn't create peace. It kills it. You see this pattern in workplaces, families, politics, everywhere. The person who demands total control always ends up destroying the very environment they're trying to dominate. Because peace requires empathy, and narcissists can't sustain empathy without feeling diminished. When the verdict came down, manslaughter, 25 years, it wasn't just so much as containment. Society saying, we can't fix this mind, but we can keep it from firing again. Even then, she reportedly showed little remorse. Narcissists rarely do. Remorse requires empathy, and empathy threatens the ego's supremacy. They'll cry for themselves, never for the victim. If you've ever argued with someone like that, you know it's like trying to teach gravity to a rock. They don't hear facts. They hear defiance. You can't appeal to their humanity. They outsourced that part long ago. You might be tempted to pity them. Don't. Don't pity them for 1 second. Pity is another form of fuel for them. They turn it into proof that they're the misunderstood hero of the story. And that story never ends well for the people around them. What happened in Ocala isn't just a neighborhood tragedy, it's a psychological cautionary tale. A reminder that unchecked entitlement is dangerous, not annoying, that the person constantly demanding respect might be the one least capable of giving it, that empathy without boundaries isn't kindness, it's complicity. You can spot them early if you know what to look for. The constant victim who's always surrounded by idiots. The one who calls every rule unfair unless they wrote it. The neighbor who believes the property line is a moral frontier. Those people don't need power, they need therapy. And when they don't get it, they create their own brand of justice. And when they get therapy, quite often they weaponize that too and just use it as another place to be heard and to get refueled. You can't fix these people. You can't. There is no fixing a narcissist. A.J. Owens never imagined that knocking on a door could end her life because normal people don't think that way. But narcissists aren't normal people. They don't live in a shared world. They live in a curated simulation where their feelings are facts and everyone else is disposable. So yes, it's tempting to label this as paranoia or fear, but fear is reactive. This was deliberate. It was a culmination of a long campaign of control. Lawrence wanted quiet. Now she's got it. 25 years of it. But peace? She'll never have that, because peace requires self-awareness, and that's the one thing a narcissist will never tolerate. So what do we take from this? Maybe it's a warning about who we empower, who we excuse, and who we let dominate the spaces we share. Or maybe it's simpler. Pay attention to the people who can't handle small inconveniences. They're not harmless. They're rehearsing for something worse. When someone starts treating boundaries as betrayal, when they can't coexist without control, that's your cue to step back. Because once their ego feels cornered, they'll do anything to win. Even if it means burning down the whole block. The sad truth is some people don't want neighbors, they want subjects. And when they finally lose control, they call it self-defense. But it's not defense. It's narcissism's final act. The delusion that you can shoot your way back into being right. And if you ever find yourself on the other side of that door, remember, the most dangerous person in the world isn't the one who hates you. It's the one who needs you to stop existing so they can finally feel at peace. That's who Susan Lawrence was. And that's who A.J. Owens met when she knocked. And now that neighborhood, like too many others, knows what happens when one person's ego decides to play God with everyone else's life. Because the thing about perfect neighbors, they're only perfect until someone dares to live next to them. Do you have a story? Do you have a narcissist story in your life? Narcissist neighbor? Or anyone? Spouse, parent, friend, child, whatever it may be. Sharing stories and letting other people know that they're not alone in this world when dealing with these monsters is very helpful. I'm sharing a lot of mine, and it's therapeutic. I encourage you to share yours in the comment section here on YouTube. If you're listening to us on the podcast platform, just search Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski on YouTube and you'll find us there. I'd love to hear your story. You can do it totally anonymously. Love to hear that. Please hit subscribe as well so you don't miss any of our coverage and commentary just like this in all sorts of cases. Until next time, I'm Tony Brueski. We'll talk again real soon.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast.